At Christmas dinner, my stepfather tapped my chair and said, "Move. That seat is for my real son." I stood up in front of everyone, quiet, humiliated, burning inside. But what he didn't know was this: the house he claimed, the authority he flaunted, none of it belonged to him. And that night, while they laughed over dessert, I finally understood the one truth that would change everything. It started with a box my father left behind, one Martin never knew existed. Please don't forget to write where you watched it, because what Martin does will make you angry and what comes out of the box will touch your heart. I hadn't even taken off my coat when Martin tapped the back of my chair with 2 fingers, light, sharp, claiming. "Ethan," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "give that seat to my son." For a second, I thought he was joking. Christmas lights glowed across the living room, the smell of roasted ham drifting in from the kitchen. My mother looked frozen in mid-step, holding a tray she was pretending not to drop. Lucas smirked behind her, already moving toward the chair like he'd been waiting for this moment. My throat tightened. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But Martin just stood there, eyebrows raised like this was a rule I'd forgotten to follow. So I slid out of the chair, quiet, automatic, feeling heat rise up my neck. As I stepped aside, Lucas sat down heavily, exhaling like he'd earned something. Nobody said a word. I pulled out my phone to check nothing in particular, anything to anchor myself. A work message from earlier still sat unread: "Need that report tonight if possible." I cleared it without opening. Christmas dinner, and I still couldn't escape people needing something from me. Martin moved on like nothing had happened. He started assigning seats, telling my mother where to put the serving dishes, directing the room like an orchestra conductor. I stood behind my new chair, a folding one, slightly wobbly, watching him take his place at the head of the table, the place that used to belong to my father. My mother caught my eye for a second, just long enough to whisper a sorry with her expression. Then she looked away. I pretended not to see the apology that wasn't allowed to be said out loud. Dinner started. The conversation flowed around me, not to me. Every time Martin spoke, people laughed a little too quickly. When Lucas cracked a joke, Martin slapped his shoulder with proud approval. When I tried to add something about work, something harmless, Martin waved a dismissive hand. "Let's keep the tech talk to a minimum," he said, reaching for the gravy. "Some of us don't want to hear about computers tonight." I shut my mouth. The table shifted back to easier subjects. Decorations, sports, vacation plans. My wobbly chair creaked each time I leaned back, a quiet reminder I wasn't meant to fit here anymore. I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting food I barely tasted. Christmas used to mean my father reading a terrible joke from a cracker and my mother laughing too loudly. Now it was Martin's voice filling every corner, reshaping everything as if history started when he arrived. Halfway through the meal, I realized my hands were shaking under the table. I curled them into fists, hiding them under the napkin. Why does this still get to me? Why am I still trying to make this feel normal? No one noticed I'd stopped eating. No one looked my way. But something inside me, small, thin, almost fragile, shifted. A hairline crack. Not anger. Not yet. Just the first quiet split where the shame no longer settled the way it used to. And once I felt it, I couldn't unfeel it. And once I felt it, I couldn't unfeel it. The next hour unfolded the way it always did, Martin taking up the whole room, occupying it with ease, shaping every moment so there was no space for anyone else. Except now I wasn't numb to it. I saw everything with a clarity I'd somehow never allowed myself before. He bragged loudly about his house, tapping the table with his knuckles as he talked about future renovations. "This place needs a real man's touch," he said, gesturing around the dining room. "Once I finish the remodel, it'll finally feel like a proper home." My mother nodded too quickly. Lucas chuckled like he already lived in every wall. I sat there, listening, chewing slowly so I didn't have to speak. Each word from him landed heavier than usual, as if the thin crack inside me widened a little more each time he opened his mouth. Every few minutes, I'd feel my phone buzz with notifications, utility bill reminders, a grocery app promo, a message from a coworker asking if I could swap shifts. All of it felt suddenly intrusive, as if even my digital life demanded something from me while I sat at a table where I wasn't wanted. When I spoke once, just once, to answer a question my mother tossed in my direction, Martin cut in before I finished. "Let's stay on topic, Ethan," he said, reaching for another roll. "No need to derail the conversation." Derail. The word stung more than it should have. Lucas made small comments under his breath. Nothing direct. Just enough to signal a hierarchy. "Yeah, Dad's right," he'd add, smirking. Dad. The word hung between us like a brick suspended on a string. My mother stayed quiet. Too quiet. She kept touching the corner of her napkin, folding and refolding it. I could tell she was waiting for a moment to redirect things, but the moment never came. Martin filled every silence. At one point he leaned back, fork tapping his plate. "Ethan, do you mind clearing the side dishes? We're trying to keep things moving." Not a request. A command disguised as efficiency. I stood, collected plates that weren't even mine, and carried them to the kitchen. The sink was already full. Of course it was. I rinsed quietly, letting the warm water numb my fingers. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the reflection of Christmas lights in the window. Everything looked festive, soft, peaceful, nothing like the heaviness inside me. Back at the table, Lucas had shifted into Martin's old stories, the ones he'd heard a dozen times. Martin nodded proudly, correcting details here and there, shaping his version of himself. I listened. I always listened. But now I heard something else beneath their voices, a pressure building in the small spaces of my chest, the kind you get when you hold your breath too long. By the time dessert arrived, even swallowing felt difficult. This life, this dynamic, this shrinking corner I'd been pushed into, suddenly felt unsustainable. Like I'd reached the edge of something without realizing it. My endurance was thinning, stretched so thin it felt like one more word, one more careless gesture, might finally snap it. I didn't sleep the night after Christmas. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, Martin's voice, the chair, the way everyone looked past me like it was normal. By morning, the crack inside me felt bigger, sharp at the edges. That was when I remembered the storage unit. Earlier that month, before any of this spiraled, I'd gone there to sort through the last of my father's things. It was supposed to be a simple task: photograph a few boxes, donate the rest, clear the overdue balance. Instead, I found a cardboard box tucked behind an old workbench, sealed with my dad's handwriting. "Property, keep safe." I brought it home, set it on the kitchen table, stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside were folders, worn, labeled, organized with my father's quiet precision. Original property deeds. Legal transfers. Financial statements. Everything dated. Everything signed. Everything pointing to one truth I hadn't expected. My father had left the house, the accounts, the land rights, everything, to me. Not to my mother. Not jointly to the family. To me. There was no confusion in the paperwork. No unclear signatures. No loopholes. I remember sitting there, stunned, as if the floor had shifted under me. For years, I'd listened to Martin talk about his house. His equity. His domain. And all along, the documents proving otherwise had been buried in a storage unit I kept forgetting to clean out. I didn't trust myself to interpret everything correctly, so I called Jenna. She stayed late at her office, combing through each document, sending me messages as she verified things. "This is valid, Ethan. These are original. Your father left everything to you, explicitly. No dramatics from her. Just precision. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not Lucas. Definitely not Martin. I kept the files stacked neatly in my desk drawer, checking them every morning like I needed to make sure they were still real. Back in the present, sitting at that same dinner table, Martin continued his performance as if the world still revolved around him. He tapped the wall behind him. Once spring hits, I'm ripping out Ethan's old bedroom. Could turn it into something useful. Maybe a home gym. Add value using the equity I've built. Equity he thinks he owns. I felt something cold settle under my skin, steady, heavy, impossible to ignore. Until then, the humiliation had been personal, emotional. But hearing him claim ownership of something he didn't have a single legal right to, that was different. That cut deeper. He kept talking, loud, confident, rewriting the house as if he'd built it himself. My mother nodded again. Lucas laughed again. Same rhythms as always, but I wasn't inside them anymore. I was watching from somewhere else, somewhere clearer. With every word, I felt less trapped. Less unsure. Less willing to let this continue. For the first time, the thought came fully formed, solid enough to steady me. This must stop. I didn't say it aloud. I didn't move. But something inside me hardened into place, a silent decision, sharp and immovable. And once it settled, I knew there was no going back. After the realization settled in my chest, heavy, immovable, I felt something inside me go still. Not angry. Not afraid. Just, still. The kind of stillness that makes everything sharper. So I started preparing. Quietly. Methodically. Not the kind of preparation anyone would notice. At least, not right away. The next morning, while Martin launched into another story about improvements he planned for his house, I opened the Notes app on my phone under the table. I documented each comment, word for word, time-stamped. Not because I needed proof for anyone else yet, but because the act itself made everything clearer. Concrete. Real. I began recording the patterns, the dismissals, the commands, the moments he cut me off mid-sentence. Lucas chiming in to reinforce him. My mother's silence filling the spaces where her voice should have been. Every detail went into that file. Not interpretation. Just observation. Later in the week, I pulled Jenna aside after work. Nothing dramatic. Just sat with her in her car outside the office and asked her what the next steps should look like. She didn't need much context. She already understood the weight of the documents we'd reviewed. She asked a few quiet questions, typed notes into her tablet, and told me she'd help me figure out the timing. No speeches. No emotion. Just clarity. I appreciated that more than I could say. Back at home, the shift in me became noticeable. My mother saw it first. She watched me move through the kitchen with a calm she didn't recognize, rinsing a plate, checking an email, answering a text. She kept trying to read my face as if she expected an explosion that never came. When I spoke, she flinched, not because my tone was sharp, but because it wasn't. It was steady. Controlled. Untouched by anything around me. Martin noticed next, and it unsettled him. He'd throw out a sarcastic remark meant to provoke a reaction. I'd respond with a neutral, and go back to what I was doing. He'd correct me about something trivial. I'd nod once, slow, deliberate. He'd try to corner me into small humiliations. I'd give him nothing, not resistance, not agreement, just quiet acknowledgement. Silence, I realized, unnerved him more than argument ever had. Lucas tried harder. Smart comments, nudges, little digs disguised as jokes. But I didn't react. Not once. I let every comment pass through me like water. If anything, each attempt only clarified for me how small these provocations really were. Martin thought my calmness meant submission. He thought he was breaking me down. But I wasn't shrinking. I was positioning myself. Every word I spoke from that point forward was intentional. Every insult from Martin slid into a mental drawer labeled evidence. Every dismissal helped sharpen the moment I knew was coming. For the first time, I wasn't surviving their authority, I was preparing to dismantle it. Quietly. Completely. And when that moment arrived, I would be ready. I felt it approaching like a change in air pressure, subtle but certain. The confrontation wasn't here yet. But I was already standing at its doorway, steady, silent, unshakably clear. By the time dessert plates were being cleared and Martin lifted his glass for another self-congratulatory toast, the air felt heavy with something unspoken. He leaned back, smiling the way a man smiles when he believes the world is arranged exactly as he wants it. To family hierarchy, he said, tapping his fork on the rim. Some roles are just natural. A few people chuckled. Lucas louder than the rest. My mother looked down at her napkin. I didn't laugh. I felt steady, quiet in a way that no longer felt like shrinking. When the table fell into an awkward stillness, I stood and placed my hand lightly on the back of my chair. Martin, I said. You and I need to talk soon. About the house. He waved a hand, dismissive. Ethan, that's not your concern. Let the adults handle property matters. A familiar line. But this time it slid right off me. It is my concern, I replied, voice even. More than you think. He blinked, thrown for half a second, then chuckled. We'll talk later. Not tonight. I didn't move. No. We will talk. And it will be soon. His smile faltered, confusion edging in. What's that supposed to mean? I reached into my inside jacket pocket and placed a single envelope on the table, not opening it, not explaining it, just letting the weight of it settle between us. This, I said quietly, contains the documents you've been assuming didn't exist. Ownership records. Transfers. Everything tied to this house. Everything tied to my father. My mother's head snapped up. Lucas leaned back slowly. Martin kept his voice low, but the tightness in it betrayed him. Ethan, what are you doing? Correcting years of assumptions, I said. We'll review them together. Soon. Not tonight. But you won't be making decisions about this house until you've read what's inside. He tried to regain footing. I've put a lot of work into this place. I won't be. I didn't ask for your agreement, I said, gently but firmly. Just your attention. Silence expanded across the table. No shouting. No dramatic gestures. Just truth settling into a space that had never made room for it before. I slipped my coat over my arm. I'm heading out. We'll talk in a few days. I felt everyone watching me as I walked toward the door, my step steady, my breath slow, my mind clear in a way it hadn't been in years. Outside, the cold air wrapped around me, sharp but grounding. My phone buzzed, work email, holiday sales, a bank notification. Normal life waiting, uncomplicated, mine again. I exhaled, long and deep. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel heavy. It felt open. I walked to my car, keys in hand, the night quiet around me. Some truths don't need permission. Only a moment to be spoken.